Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are getting into a piece of gear that, well, it really changed the game for bass players in a lot of ways. The MXR M85 Bass Distortion. If you're a bassist, you know this feeling. You stomp on your distortion pedal, you get that awesome gnarly sound, that grit, but
Yeah.
where did the bottom end go? Suddenly your sound is all mids and highs.
Yeah, it's like the foundation just drops out. And that specific frustration, that's exactly what the M85 was built to fix. The big challenge is always keeping those super low frequencies, below maybe 80 hertz solid,
Right.
while you're really clipping the heck out of the rest.
Right. Distortion circuits often mess with phase down there, didn't they?
Exactly. Phase cancellation just eats up your punch. So the M85 aimed to give you that, quote, brutal biting distortion, but, and this is the key part, while guaranteeing that low-end clarity.
Okay, so how did they actually manage that? Let's unpack this. This pedal came out, 2015? And MXR, obviously a huge name, but the way this pedal came about was a bit different for a big company. They seemed to know they needed something extra.
That's right. It wasn't just the MXR engineers in a room. They actually teamed up with Ryan Ratatsky.
From Fuzz Roche's pedals.
The very same.
Yeah.
And Fuzz Roche's, well, they're known in the boutique world for these really aggressive but somehow still musical drive circuits. So this partnership was kind of genius.
So bringing that boutique, almost hand-wired sensibility to MXR's production scale.
Exactly. You get that specialized tone knowledge, but at a price point that, well, more people can actually afford.
And it wasn't totally out of the blue in their lineup either, right? It slotted in next to another bass pedal.
Yeah, it was sort of conceived as the distortion counterpart to their M84 Bass Fuzz Deluxe.
Yeah.
They borrowed that blend idea, which worked really well in the fuzz, but tweaked it for harder clipping, something a bit more modern sounding.
Okay.
What's fascinating here is the goal was crystal clear from the start.
Yeah.
Make it versatile, let it get really saturated, but never lose that fundamental low end. They were essentially thinking about it like a parallel processing setup right from the beginning.
Protecting that 80 hertz and below zone at all costs.
That was the mission. Keep the bass breathing, no matter how nasty the distortion got on top.
So let's get into that system then, the circuit itself. It's all analog, and it's built around these two parallel paths. Path 1, the dry channel. That's pretty straightforward.
Super simple. That's just your clean bass signal. Full frequency range, no effects. It's the bedrock. Untouched.
Okay. And path 2, the wet channel.
Okay.
This is where the distortion lives. It uses hard clipping, you said, and specifically MOSFET diodes.
Correct. Hard clipping via MOSFETs.
Now, hang on. Hard clipping sometimes gets a bad rap, especially older solid-state stuff. Doesn't that risk sounding kind of harsh or, I don't know, fizzy?
That's a great point, and exactly why they went with MOSFETs. See, MOSFETs tend to clip a bit more like tubes do, a bit softer, maybe asymmetrical, so the distortion saturates more smoothly.
So it gives you that richer harmonic thing, more like a 2-damp pushed hard rather than just hitting a brick wall.
Precisely. You avoid that really harsh, sterile edge you could get from simpler diode clipping. It feels more responsive.
Okay, so you've got the clean path and this tube-like distortion path running side by side. The magic must be in how they come back together.
That is absolutely the secret sauce.
Yeah.
The sources really stress this. The blend happens right at the very end, at the output stage.
Not earlier in the circuit.
No. And that's crucial, because the distortion path, which is heavily processed and could have phase issues, deals with the mids and highs completely separately from the clean lows. Then they recombine just before the output jack.
So there's no chance for that phase cancellation to happen in the low frequencies.
Exactly. It guarantees those subs survive. It's a fundamentally different approach than just running your signal through a distortion circuit.
It's more like surgical separation and recombination.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
And they built other stuff around that too, like true bypass switching, obviously, but also using low noise
It just matters a lot with high gain, right?
Yeah.
Noise floor can creep up.
Oh, yeah. High gain amplifies everything, including inherent circuit noise. So good op amps keep it quiet, even when you've got the distortion cranked. Plus, some custom EQ filtering in there to help keep things clear.
Okay, understanding that dual path thing makes the controls make a lot more sense. You've got separate level knobs, dry and wet or distortion. Why is having those two separate levels so powerful?
It's everything, really. If it was just one master volume and a blend knob, you'd have less control. With independent levels, you can, say, keep your dry signal really loud and just add a touch of wet distortion texture on top.
So you maintain all the punch, but add some hair.
Exactly. Or you could do the opposite. Pull the dry level back a bit and push the wet level for a sound that's mostly distortion, almost like a fuzz, but with that clean foundation still faintly there. It's like having a mini mixer on your board.
And the distortion knob itself, that's just gain for the wet channel, going from, subtle around 9 o'clock up to full saturation.
Yep, pretty standard gain control there. But the tone knob,
This is clever.
what's special about the tone knob? The key is it only affects the wet, distorted signal path.
Oh, not the dry signal at all.
Not one bit. So turn it counterclockwise, the distortion gets darker, warmer. Turn it clockwise, the distortion gets brighter, more cutting, more aggressive.
That's brilliant. So you can completely change the character of the distortion, make it smooth or make it bite, without accidentally scooping your fundamental low end because the dry path just sails right on through unaffected.
It makes dialing in sound so much easier. You're not constantly fighting that trade-off between grit and low-end presence.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. That little toggle switch, the SIL LED switch. This seems like the heart of the pedal's personality, beyond the blend. Why two different clipping modes?
Versatility, really. They wanted it to cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So the silicon mode cell dryal that gives you a smoother, more compressed kind of distortion. Think classic rock, maybe even a bit vintagey.
So warmer mids, tighter feel, good for adding drive without getting too wild.
Exactly. It's great for that, or even for pushing into a slightly woolly, almost fuzzy territory when the gain is up. Very smooth compression.
And then you flick it over to LED.
And it's like a different pedal almost. The LED mode is way more open, it feels louder, it's definitely more aggressive, and it's much more dynamic.
Dynamic how?
It reacts much more strongly to how hard you play. The sources mentioned it's great for modern stuff, heavy rock, metal, especially with pick. It cleans up more when you play softly and then really bites and crunches when you dig in. It feels kind of like pushing a tube amp hard.
Ah, okay. So if you want that real interactive feel where the distortion level follows your attack, LED is the way to go.
Definitely. And when you combine these modes with the dry blend and the distortion knob, the sheer range is huge. You can get just a hint of warmth with low distortion in Sasai mode.
Like barely noticeable grit.
Yeah, almost transparent warmth. Or you can crank the distortion knob way up in LED mode, maybe dial back the dry a little and get this absolutely crushing aggressive grind. But that base fundamental is still there, holding everything down.
Let's maybe paint a picture with some sounds. If someone wanted, say, vintage, grit warm, smooth, classic rock kind of thing.
Okay, for that, you'd probably be in sol mode. Distortion, maybe around 11 o'clock, not too high. Blend knob, maybe favoring the dry signal slightly.
And that gets you.
That smooth, kind of woolly breakup. Think Motown meets early rock, nice warm mids, smooth saturation.
Okay. Now, what if you need something heavier? Modern growl. Think clear attack, strong mids, cuts through a band.
For that, you'd likely flip to LED mode, push the distortion up maybe to 1 o'clock or so, keep a healthy amount of dry blended in for definition.
And the LED mode gives you that edge.
Yeah, you get that crisp attack, the volume boost, and because it's more dynamic, your notes really pop, even in a dense mix. Doesn't get muddy.
And for the really extreme stuff, the sources mentioned sounds for heavy doom or sludge metal.
For that thick, sludgy sound, you'd crank the distortion knob way up past 3 o'clock. But here's the twist. You'd probably go back to SIL mode.
Really? Why SIL over the heavy stuff?
Because the natural compression in cello mode gives you that incredibly dense, thick, almost fuzz-like wall of sound that doom and sludge genres thrive on. LED might be too open or sharp for that, but you'd keep that dry blend working hard underneath to make sure the actual notes don't just turn into complete mush.
That versatility and dynamic feel must make it great live.
Oh, absolutely. It responds so well to playing dynamics. Dig in, it snarls. Back off, it warms up. That's why you see it on so many hard rock, punk, and metal boards.
And players can probably tweak the dry-wet balance to suit different rooms too, right?
Exactly. If the room is boomy, maybe dial back the dry a touch. If it's thin, bring more dry in, all without messing up your core distorted tone.
Yeah.
And yeah, it pairs really well with other MXR bass gear, like their M80 DI Plus or the M81 preamp. It often acts as the main dirt source.
How about in the studio?
It's super useful there too. That LED mode gives you amazing high-end detail, which can help a bass line cut through a really busy mix on a record.
It makes the attack really clear.
Yeah. But then, if you need something warmer, maybe more analog saturation on a bass stem, a SIL mode is perfect. Less piercing highs. And apparently, because it's got such rich harmonics and that blend control, some engineers even use it on guitar sometimes.
Huh. Didn't expect that. What about putting it on a pedal board? Where does it like to sit in the chain?
Generally, like most drives, you want it fairly early. Definitely before things like chorus, flanger, delay. Distortion into wet effects usually sounds better than wet effects into distortion.
Right. Gets messy otherwise.
Yeah. And an interesting trick is putting a compressor before the M85. something like the MXR M87 compressor. That can tighten up the signal hitting the distortion circuit, making the distortion itself feel even punchier and more focused.
And then EQ after it.
Yeah, an EQ or a preamp pedal after the M85 is great for shaping the final combined sound, maybe boosting certain mids or cutting lows if needed for the overall mix.
So looking back at its place in the market now, the M85 really has become a kind of modern classic, hasn't it? Pros seem to love it because it's quiet, flexible, and just works well in a mix.
It does. And it's interesting to compare it to other pedals that were around or came after. People often say it's warmer sounding than something like the Dark Glass B3K, which is known for more modern, almost clinical, aggressive CMOS distortion.
So the M85's MOSFETs give it that different, warmer character, more mid-focused.
Yeah, more tube-like warmth and mid-saturation compared to the B3K's more scooped, aggressive bite. And compared to MXR's own M84 Bass Fuzz, the M85 is just way more versatile and can get much more aggressive. But it's also more controlled, maybe less wild than a classic vintage fuzz like an EHX Bass Big Muff.
So it really carved out its own niche.
It really did. It sort of sits perfectly between those vintage fuzzes and the super modern drives. It proved you could have serious aggression and refinement and keep your low end all in one standard size pedal.
And that cool detail about where the LED mode came from.
Right. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the M85 really helps cement the formula for modern analog-based distortion. You need a clean blend, you probably want switchable clipping modes for different dynamics, and you must protect the low end.
And the LED mode was adapted from that Fuzzrocious pedal.
Yeah, the Fuzzrocious rat tail circuit, which was already known for being really dynamic and amp-like. But the absolute key move by MXR, the real engineering breakthrough, was modifying the tone filtering around that circuit. They specifically tweaked it to extend the low frequency response below 80 Hz. That was the magic trick that guaranteed the low end wouldn't get wiped out, which was a huge deal for bass distortion back then.
So wrapping up our deep dive on the MXR M85, the key things to remember are probably that boutique collaboration with Fuzzrocious, the absolute importance of that dual blend path for low-end clarity, and then the power you get from that SILD switch for dialing in vintage warmth or modern aggression.
Absolutely. The M85 basically proved that analog bass distortion could finally be both really aggressive and still refined, getting past that old 80 Hz barrier problem. Which kind of makes you wonder, now that this blend and mode switch formula is almost expected, how will pedal designers keep pushing? How will that ongoing quest for perfect low-end clarity shape the next generation of bass drive pedals? That's something to think about next time you plug in.